Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the panel discussion the SETA Foundation organized to analyze the outcomes of the May the 14th elections. We gathered with a number of distinguished speakers to analyze the May the 14th election results. These elections were particularly important for Turkish people, but at the same time, for its implications for international relations, the issues beyond Turkey's own boundaries, as we have seen in the takes and analysis or coverage of the certain media outlets. For example, the Economist magazine deemed the elections in Turkey as the most important elections in 2023. We passed the first round of elections on the May the 14th, as none of the candidates has secured the 50% threshold of the votes. Turkey will head to a runoff on the May the 28th, and the results and the implications of the elections need to be analyzed and discussed. For this reason, I will briefly introduce the speakers of this panel discussion. I will start with introducing Professor Muhittin Ataman. He is the International Relations Professor at Social Sciences University of Ankara, and at the same time, he is the Editor-in-Chief of the flagship academic journal of SETA Foundation inside Turkey. Secondly, we have Mrs. Valeria Giannotta. She is the Director of Türkiye Observatory of the CeSPI think tank in Italy. And also we have Professor Yücel Acer from Ankara Yıldırım Beyazıt University. He's an international law professor and at the same time a foreign policy and international law expert of SETA Foundation. I would like to thank and welcome all of our distinguished speakers, and I would like to start with Professor Muhittin Ataman about his take of the general results of the elections. Professor Ataman, what is your take on the results of the May the 14th elections, and especially what do you think the message is from the elections, especially with regards to its impact and value for Turkish democracy? The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Bilgehan. As you have just mentioned, last week's election was really historical. We all agree that Turkey was at the crossroads. That is, depending on the results of the elections, Turkey will choose two opposite directions in almost all issue areas, but especially in foreign policy. So it was quite critical. And most international observers, they were closely watching the process. Mainly the Western observers, they were claiming the opposite of what, let's say, the Middle Easterners, the people and the states in the Middle East, or in the most of the non-Western part of the world, their expectation, their reading were quite opposite. So it was quite an interesting election. For me, seeing the result of the elections, I consider this as a manifestation of a mature democracy in Turkey. Although there are too many other things claimed, especially by the Western media and politicians, especially before the elections, Turkey and the Turkish people is quite aware of the maturity of the strength of democratic tradition here within Turkey. We can start with one significant indication, which is the voter turnout in the elections. It was a record high, almost 90%, 90% of voter turnout. Probably you cannot see even a close turnout in the, for instance, in the liberal Western European countries. That is, the Turkish people is aware, and it knows, the Turkish people knows that it has an effective will which will determine who will run the country, who will govern the country. And their choice naturally was Recep Tayyip Erdogan and the political alliance established by the AK Party. That's why I consider this as a victory for the Turkish democracy. It was quite interesting for me to see that an American magazine, Newsweek, has written down that calling the Western observers and politicians, stop calling Erdogan a dictator. Dictators do not go to run off. That is underlining the reality on the ground. That is, the Turkish democracy has been already consolidated, and the people has been showing their will. So this was quite interesting to see this. The second thing is, all politicians in Turkey, they respect the national will. Many people, they claim that, especially again in the West, unfortunately, that Recep Tayyip Erdogan will not take over the power, but he already did this in 2019 after the local elections. We all know that nowadays many Turkish metropolitan cities such as Istanbul, Ankara, Izmir, they are already governed by CHP mayors. So if the Turkish people voted otherwise, Recep Tayyip Erdogan repeatedly declares that he is ready to take the necessary step and recognize the results of the elections. So it is a real reflection of the national will, and every politician in Turkey has to accept this reality. The third significant result of these elections was, the people of Turkey overall, they still have a significant trust in Erdogan and in his leadership. Although, he didn't succeed to get more than 50% of the votes to be declared as the next president of the country, but still, there was about 2.5 million difference between Erdogan and his closest rival, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. So it was a 5-point difference, which is quite significant. That is, looking the other side of the medallion, the Turkish people did not, and probably will not trust the national alliance. That is the alliance formed by CHP and its leader Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, because there are too many conflictual perspectives coming together. On the one hand, you see ultra-nationalists, ultra-Turkish nationalists. On the other hand, you see the Kurdish nationalists, or pro-PKK, HDP, or leftist, so Green Left Party, etc. So it's not easy to bring all these conflictual perspectives and rule the country based on these conflictual perspectives and create harmony out of this. Even the Western observers, they have underlined repeatedly they concern about, let's say, Temel Karamollaoğlu's or Davutoğlu's political parties, there's somehow anti-Western perspective or Islamist oriented perspective, etc. So it's not easy to bring all these together. And most of the promises explained by the opposition were not real. That is, they were most of these promises were fictive. That is unmet promises. So that's why the Turkish people did not trust in them. Another significant, to me, the most significant dimension of the result was the representation of different, even conflictual perspectives, ideologies, identities in this election. When we see the election campaign, when we look at the election campaign and the results, we see that, you know, from the radical left to the radical right, ultra-rightist nationalists, they were all represented in the election campaigns, and they will be represented in the Turkish parliament, the 600-member Turkish parliament. So Islamists will be there, mainstream leftists, mainstream liberals, conservative Democrats. So it's a very large scala of representation is there. For instance, the Kurds, they have entered into the elections in different political parties as Kurds. That is, many Kurdish political political parties claiming that they represent the Kurdish constituents, they did their election campaign, they run their election campaign in Kurdish language. For instance, some political parties, they made their official propaganda speech on TRT Channel 1 in Kurdish language. The Alevites, another significant social identity in Turkey, you know, Kılıçdaroğlu himself, he declares his Alevi identity, and no one, that is no large segment of the society, questioned his social identity, and it was not discussed largely. So they have entered, he himself entered into the election as an Alevite individual. And this was a kind of unique development in the history of Turkey, because an Alevi individual received about 26 million of votes, probably half of which did not come, at least half of which did not come from the Alevites. That is, this shows how the Turkish society is integrated with the Kurdish identity, with its Alevite identity, with radical left or ultra-right, etc. So all these ideologies and identities will be represented by the Turkish parliament. At the end, you know, probably especially after these elections, I personally expect from the international observers that please do not change or do not distort the realities on the ground. Turkey has a long tradition of democracy. That is, the Turkish people has been freely casting their votes since 1950s, and this will not change soon. So I hope that the perception of Turkey will change, as the headlines of Newsweek magazine showed us. The West will not try to distort the Turkish elections. And we all know that all these attempts made by the Western magazines, media, social media platforms, all of this backfired. That is, the aware and self-aware Turkish constituents will not allow any external intervention into domestic affairs of Turkey. And this environment, this self-confidence was largely provided by Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his political leadership in the last 20 years. So I will keep it here. Thank you very much, Bilgehan.
Professor Ataman, thank you very much, especially for sticking to time limits and, of course, for your valuable analysis. You touched upon very many important issues in terms of the diversity of the opposition camp, the challenge of maintaining the harmony among themselves. You touched upon and highlighted it's a victory for Turkish democracy in terms of voter turnout, and also at the same time the respect for national will, no matter who wins the elections, and especially the call for restraint or call for non-intervention, or being objective and fair when it comes to international observers' takes on Turkey's democracy and election process, and also the Kurdish and Alevi identities. Maybe this time they have been very much or extensively represented, and they were regardless of being minority, let's say, identities, they have been approved from the majority of the voters. It was showcased by Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu securing his votes, at least half of them coming from non-Alevi constituencies. Thank you very much, and we'll come back to you in the following round. Now I will turn to Mrs. Valeria Giannotta from CeSPI think tank. Valeria, you are a close observer of Turkey's foreign policy, domestic politics. I wonder, what is your take on the results of the elections? What are the key takeaways from the results for you? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bilgehan, and thank you to SETA Foundation for organizing such a timely event. I will say that I was pretty much impressed by these past elections for several factors, because I think there are new elements in the Turkish political game. The first one is, as it was mentioned by the professor, the turnout. I mean, this was a record turnout. I mean, as far as I analyze, in Turkey, there's been always a very high turnout, which marks the difference, for example, with the West. In the West, people do not participate that much in politics. Turkish people, on the other side, they feel the responsibility to have a say. They are very responsive to the calls or going and casting their vote. So this involvement is really remarkable. And the second new element that I've noticed is the fact that we are going, for the first time in the most recent political history of Turkey, and the first time of Recep Tayyip Erdogan in power, to the runoff, which is another new element, I would say, another first time. And honestly, I do believe that Recep Tayyip Erdogan has taken a big challenge, because I mean the opposition was able to keep united several different groups, several different parties coming from different traditions, and this time the challenge was very big and the stake was very high. I go back to the Western perception. In the West, and also some Western observers in Turkey, they were pretty much sure that was the end of Recep Tayyip Erdogan political tenure in Turkey. And they were sort of celebrating behind the stage on Saturday night. Say, okay, tomorrow we will celebrate the new era of Turkish politics. This is not the case. I mean, on the other side, Erdogan was able to increase the support, which was enough, but it wasn't enough just for a very small margin of votes. And the gap, as it was expected along the survey, was very small. But instead, the gap after the polls between Erdogan and Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu was wider. So this means something. It means that from the opposition side, there were some mistakes. And I do believe that the first mistake is related to the leadership. I mean, Turkey is a country where the charismatic leadership matters. And the way you mobilize, you are able to penetrate the society, to respond to the need of society, to address the society matters a lot. And here it comes another element, which sign, I think, a dividing line. Because despite the criticism that Erdogan got overall in the West and also in Turkey, just right after the terrible earthquake, the support coming from the earthquake zone did not change. Malatya, Adıyaman, Kahramanmaraş, Gaziantep, they have opted for Recep Tayyip Erdogan. I think because he's the leader who, first of all, went there directly. So he addresses the needs of the people and he delivered. He was able to deliver. While on the other side, I think there was this lack of communication and this lack of appeal towards the most affected population. So this means something. And again, this means that the West or the international observers, they have to learn how to deal with Turkey, and they have to learn how to perceive Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and his power. And then I would say that another significant element, if we look at the results and the new composition of the parliament, is the plurality of the parliament. AK Party got the majority. There is like a line, and also if we look at the results in general, the nationalistic approach is the trend of the Turkey nowadays. But there are new elements who enter the parliament. For example, I think if I'm not wrong, Refah Partisi got 5 seats, and the İşçi, Labour and Freedom Party got 4 seats as well. This means that, Turkey is ready for a sort of a pluri-party logic, and this is a sign of pluralism. Again, we go back to the idea of democracy. When it comes to the perception from the international community, I've seen a sort of polarization, honestly. Now the West is admitted, as I mentioned before, that there was some mistake in addressing Turkey and perceiving Turkey and the emotional feeling also of Turkish people. So I think there is a lack of knowledge of the psychology of the country, first of all. But on the other side, there was the Muslim world, that he was just endorsing Recep Tayyip Erdogan. I read just right before the elections a letter that it was penned by some Islamic scholars from different sides of the world, and they were explaining the reason why Turkey should have voted for Recep Tayyip Erdogan, because he's the leader able to stand, he's the leader able to deliver, he's the leader who represents, or he would like to have a fairer world, as he says most of the time. He's the leader who gave voice to people that they've been emarginated for too long from the political and social game, not just in Turkey, but also all around the world. So I think those are the new elements and very interesting. And beside that, I think we should also analyze the Sinan Oğan approach in this political and in the presidential election. Actually, his support has been stable. I've been following the electoral results since the beginning until the end. His political support has been stable around 5.3, 5.2. This again means that Turkey is standing and is sticking on nationalistic line. Turkish people are very proud of themselves. They don't want to get interfered. They do not want an interference from any other actor, neither in the region or international actor. And they struggle to keep the unity of the country. In the other side, I think the opposition has played a lot and has been pivoting a lot on the Kurdish electorate. And actually, this is another new element. I think Kılıçdaroğlu was very good in mobilizing the support of the Kurdish most populated area. And again, in Diyarbakir, they mainly opted for his leadership. And this is another turning point. But again, there is this very fragile line between the political affiliation or political representation of the Kurdish identity and the terrorist, let's say, connotation of this Kurdish group. So I think the coming days will be very, very interesting to follow. What I've seen is that the opposition got the lesson that, first of all, the communication campaign wasn't so good, and also that they needed to develop more on a nationalistic base. But what my forecast personally is that Erdogan will not have any problem in winning again the second round. And I leave the floor here, and I'm available for any other question if there is any.
Thank you very much, Valeria, for your very valuable analysis. Again, you've touched also upon very important points, such as the record turnout, voter turnout in elections, people's sense of responsibility when it comes to going to ballot boxes and casting their votes. And again, it was the first time the Turkish people are heading to a runoff in Turkish elections. You talked about the challenges for Erdogan, and also despite the widespread belief in the West, especially or international arena, this wasn't the end of Erdogan tenure. The results proved many observers wrong. And you talked about how still charismatic leadership matters for Turkish people and how it matters in Turkish politics. The earthquake zone's behavior, the unchanged behavior, so to speak, was important because the expectation is that the earthquake was an important watershed moment and would have an impact on the outcome. But the voter behavior not changed. Again, very strong support to Erdogan. It was again an important takeaway. And you pointed to very important trends, which is the nationalism trend, as we see in the results of the elections. But you defined it in a particular way. It is not a nationalism as we know, but maybe a nationalism that's calling or demanding a non-intervention into domestic issues, and at the same time securing or ensuring Turkey's territorial integrity. And of course, you also pointed to the challenge for the opposition, the Nation Alliance, bridging maintaining the hard balance between Kurdish identity and maintaining a distance to terror ties of this identity, of this component of opposition. Thank you very much again, and now we will turn to Professor Yücel Acer from Ankara Yıldırım Beyazıt University. Professor Acer, thank you for joining us, and I will again direct the same question to you. What is your general assessment from the election results? I also kindly ask you to shed light on the free and fair nature of the elections, and what is your key takeaway, especially with regards to free and fairness of the elections in Turkey. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Metehan, Bilgehan, sorry. And also, I would also thank to SETA for organizing this significant event. And I have to emphasize, just like with my colleagues, that the elections on 14th May has significant reflections on the internal politics of Turkey, as well as on the international politics. I could also say that the result of the elections have reflections on even global balances between many major countries, simply because Turkey is playing a significant role in international politics. Unlike the past, Turkey has become one of the major powers in the region and also globally. So that's why the result of the elections have reflections on not only on internal politics, but also on international politics as well. So my colleagues actually have dealt with some of these reflections. And I could only, as a general observation, say, to add the points that has been made, is that, there have been two main conflicting arguments. President Erdogan argued on the national, successes of Turkey in many areas, not only in the defense industry, but also in many areas. So he really emphasized the achievements of Turkey in many significant areas. And as well as this, and he also emphasized the significance of national security of Turkey. And he emphasized that there still are many threats directed towards Turkish national security. So that's why this is still a very significant issue. On the other hand, the opposition argued on certain concepts like human rights, rule of law, democracy, justice. These kind of concepts have been the arguments of opposition. I think the result of the elections demonstrates clearly that there are no crisis of democracy. There is no crisis of human rights. There is no crisis of justice. There is no crisis of rule of law in Turkey. Although there could be some problems concerning with these, fundamental principles, but, as the result of the election says, there is no such crisis in Turkey. Still, the Turkish people gives the more importance to the national successes as well as the national security. So that's the general result that I can read from the result of the elections. But as an international law scholar, I am going to concentrate on a rather different aspect of the recent elections in Turkey. This is how the elections have been conducted in terms of right to fair and free elections. Concentrating on this is actually necessitates, first of all, the clarification of the concept of free and fair election. And then there has been some observation activities conducted by some European institutions on the elections on Turkey. So there have been some positive, remarks on the relations on the elections in Turkey, as well as some, let's say, negative observations on the elections on Turkey. So in the final part, I will try to clarify whether the criticisms raised by some institutions in Europe are really justified. Let me start with the concept of free and fair election. This is a right, individual right, actually recognized in the European Convention on Human Rights. If we look at the Article 3 of the Protocol 1 added to the Convention just a couple of years after the acceptance of the Convention, it talks about free elections. And it says in Article 3 that everybody, it's not the clear word that I'm using here, just to clarify the content of this right. Actually, the convention, the protocol is underlining the responsibility of all member countries to hold free elections at a reasonable intervals by secret ballot. So the article also emphasized the conditions that the people could express their free will. So this is described like an obligation of member countries, but also it's an individual right to free and fair election. So as we can see, there are some significant principles concerning this issue: the free elections, reasonable intervals, secret ballots, and free expression of opinion of the people. So when we try to understand how the elections have been conducted in Turkey, we should concentrate on these concepts. There are 56 countries parties to the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe. This organization has been established many years ago to try to bolster the democracy and human rights in European countries. Now there are 56 countries. This organization also conducts quite close observations in all elections held in the member countries. So just like what happens in all member countries, this organization again has established an observation team, or we can officially call it observation mission, in the recent elections in Turkey. There have been many observers from many countries who came to Turkey to observe the elections here. The observers came from 40 different countries. So this is quite significant to mention this number. because Turkey has opened its elections to the close observation of the Organization on Security and Cooperation in Europe. After the observations, that started before the elections and continued during the elections, and also still continues after the elections. So it's quite, significant to see what is really the outcomes of all these observations conducted by the Organization on Security and Cooperation in Europe. As I said, there have been many people. Their number was over just 400 people coming from 40 different countries. Before the election, there have been some remarks concerning the conditions that Turkey was going towards the election. And also, just after the election, there was a press conference made by the organization, as well as joined by the Parliament of Europe, of the Council of Europe, and also some other institutions, observing the elections. There have been some positive remarks. First of all, I have to emphasize. The first one is that, the elections was conducted in a very peaceful atmosphere. That was the point which was, mentioned as a positive remark concerning the elections. Peaceful. So, despite the quite high tension before the election, and the European institutions also endorses that, the elections have been held quite peacefully. That's quite significant. Peace is quite fundamental to have free and fair election. Since there was a peaceful atmosphere before and during the elections in Turkey, so that means one of the fundamental elements have been achieved for a fair and free elections. And secondly, the remarks also emphasize the strong democratic spirit. Muhittin Hoca emphasized the level of the Turkish democracy as a matured one. Strong democratic spirit was emphasized in these remarks. Again, despite this, high tension, or sometimes strong political divisions, the elections, demonstrated that Turkey has a very strong democratic tradition. Despite the high tensions, there have been no significant developments, spoiling the atmosphere of the elections. Let me also talk a little bit about the negative remarks made by the organization. I think the first negative point that they have been trying to emphasize was unjustified advantage over the opposition parties that the government had during the campaign period. This is quite general observation. I'm going to talk about it a little bit. I'm just trying to, summarize what kind of negative remarks the organization made. This is the first point, an unjustified advantage over the opposition parties. The second point, negative point, concerned the Turkey's higher election board. Supreme Election Board was criticized because it lacked of transparency in its handling of the elections. That's again quite general observation. Lack of transparency as far as the Supreme Election Board is concerned. Another point that we can understand from the remark is that by state media, state media, this concept probably refers to TRT because it says biased state media coverage concerning the election. That's another, a negative point we can get from the observations. Maybe the last point is that the report says, the statement says that there was an intimidation directed towards the pro-Kurdish Green Left Party. It doesn't mention what has been the intimidation concretely, but it only says that there was an intimidation directed towards the pro-Kurdish Green Left Party. Let me add the last point. 2 people, as proposed as an observer in the elections in Turkey, were refused by Turkey. I mean, they were not accepted in Turkey to observe the elections. One of them was Kadir Kasırga. He's a parliamentarian in Sweden. Another parliamentarian from Denmark, Søren Søndergaard. These two people have been refused to accept into country. This was also, criticized. Let me briefly, in a couple of minutes, give my observations about these, criticisms. Of course, we have to say that good elections, good atmosphere, fair elections, free elections. There are no criticism that, suggest that the elections were not fair and free. The only element is unequal condition as a general, criticism is quite unfounded. Although government has some, resources, but also the opposition had resources because they have mayorships in 3 major cities in Turkey, Izmir, Ankara, and Istanbul. So we cannot say that there have been unfair conditions for campaigning. Let me say personally that in Ankara, as a city in which I live, I have seen many more campaign booklets than the government was trying to show, probably because the mayorship of Ankara was in the opposition parties. So as far as the criticism concerning the Supreme Election Board, I have never had an impression that this board has been intransparent. The head of the board has been giving almost in every hour statements concerning the questions and the processes. So how it could be regarded as an intransparency is quite ununderstandable in my perception. Another point, biased state media. Again, the opposition parties have enough number of television channels, social media instruments. Concerning the state media, TRT works according to the internal regulations, and according to the regulations, every single party going to the election had a chance to express itself in the state television. So it was according to it happened according to the related internal regulations. So intimidation, quite strange that everybody was so far, complaining about the intimidation made by the PKK and by its sympathizers. So quite strange that first time I am hearing an intimidation directed towards this party is quite interesting. And the last point is that 2 people have been refused by Turkey. Again, according to the rules of the organization, all observers should be scrutinized by the accepting country, and if there is a permission from the accepting country, then these people can go into that country. The selection of these people could be quite problematic. One of the people refused, Kadir, he's a parliamentarian in Sweden, but also he is known as a very closely related person to the PKK. Actually, although he's a Swedish parliament, he's dealing with not the Swedish issues, but always the international issues, internal issues of Turkey, rather than Sweden. Another parliamentarian is again known for his hostile attitudes against Turkey. These kind of people could not be impartial and independent in terms of observing the elections in Turkey. That's why Turkey refused to accept these people, quite understandably. So sorry if I exceeded my time limit. That's all I can say.
Professor Acer, thank you very much for your thorough analysis of election results, especially with regards to the process and the conduct of elections, and especially which references to international conventions and the basis, legal basis over which they are being conducted. There were important assessments, such as it was the results were both influential over both domestic and international dynamics, as Turkey's international status has been elevated over years. You mentioned Erdogan's emphasis during his campaign on nation's successes, achievements, and at the same time the threats facing Turkey's national security, and they were impactful on voter behavior. And at the same time, you draw attention to the difference between opposition and incumbents campaigns when it comes to their emphasis and slogans during the campaigns. And opposition's emphasis was on human rights, rule of law, and democracy, and the threats, or actually the shortcomings of Turkey in terms of human rights and democracy, and whether they are fair assessments or not. The results indicated that their arguments have not been widely shared by the majority of the voters. And it appears that the national achievements and the security concerns trump over all other issues in the behavior of the voters. And the clarification on the scope of free and fair elections concepts very important, and also the thorough account of how the process has been conducted. The elections were closed or observed by OSCE as an institution and their observers. It was important that the elections were overall conducted in a peaceful atmosphere. And you also mentioned the negative, say, assessments or comments by the OSCE observers, and you one by one dealt with all of them. And your message is that the negative assessments are mainly unfounded, and you also mentioned why it is so. Thank you very much again for your analysis. I would like to thank all of our speakers. Now I want to switch to Q&A session, and there are a couple of questions. I will read them, and I will ask our speakers, whoever wants to answer them. The first question is about the role of Kurdish voters in the elections and their impact on the outcome. So, what do the results tell us about the behavior of Kurdish votes or HDP constituency? What impact did they have on the outcome, and what will likely their impact will be on the runoff? So whoever wants to intervene, it is welcome. But I think Professor Ataman, you would want to jump in. The floor is yours, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Bilgehan. Yeah, I want to say a couple of things about the Kurdish constituents. First of all, you know, the number of political parties who claim that they mainly represent the Kurdish people is not one. That is, it's not HDP or YSP only. Okay, so traditionally, many people, they know that until very recently, it used to claim the monopoly of the pro-Kurdish politics in Turkey. Now there are several other smaller political parties also mainly focusing on the Kurdish question. You know, one was Hakpar, it is a kind of mainstream leftist political party, but more importantly, we have Hüdapar, which is an Islamic-oriented political party and became part of the People's Alliance. And in the next parliament, they will be the party will be represented by 4, I think, as far as I know so far, 4 members of the parliament. That is, they have been the main challenger of the influence of PKK and HDP in the Kurdish regions. Now, we see that they will be at the capital, Ankara. So when we look at the election results, this is one main result. Similar to the diversification plurality of the overall Turkish politics, the Kurdish politics more than ever began to be diversified. And not to forget that AK Party has been receiving a large portion of the Kurdish constituents, the support of a large portion of the Kurdish people. So one is the diversification of pro-Kurdish political scala. The second one is AK Party and Recep Tayyip Erdogan compared with the last elections, last presidential and parliamentarian elections in 2018, both Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his party, AK Party, increased the percentage of their votes in southeastern part of Turkey, that is in the Kurdish region. For instance, in Diyarbakir, 3 members of parliament were elected from AK Party. In Batman, in some elections, AK Party was unable to have only 1 member of the parliament. But in last week's elections, AK Party, for instance, had 2 members of parliament. So overall, yes, that's true. HDP line, YSP line supported Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, but not all of pro-HDP voted, as far as I know, voted for Kılıçdaroğlu, but largely they voted for him because, unfortunately, they are very determined constituents. So whatever the party leadership tells them, they vote accordingly. So they don't question the candidacy, even for the members of the parliament or for the presidential candidate. So this was this has been one of the anomalies of the Kurdish constituents here in Turkey. But still, as I've said, even from a new welfare party, that is Yeniden Refah Party, and other small-scale political parties, they also received a certain degree of votes from the Kurdish constituents. They are known as the most motivated voters overall in Turkey. For the runoff, I think this level of motivation will significantly decrease since they don't have their own candidate. And for the first round, they went to the polling station to cast their votes, first of all, for their members of the parliament, not for presidential candidates. So this time, they don't need to go to the polling station to cast their votes for their members of the parliament, but for the presidential candidate only. And this by itself will decrease their motivation. And I expect a lower turnout in the runoff on May 28th. This is it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ataman. It was really important to address the likely impact of Kurdish voter behavior in the runoff and its outcome. And now I would like to switch to the second question. This question is about the series of analysis in the Western media outlets or analysis outlets. The question is, how would you evaluate the performance of analysis in the West prior to elections, and what lesson or lessons should be drawn for the future? Valeria, would you like to pick up on that?
Fine. Okay. Now, as I said before, I think the main of the Western analysts, they have to change their lenses when they look at Turkey. I mean, they have to. Turkey is a very complicated country, and I would say it's the most peculiar country in the region. And it has some, I mean, very peculiar and very unique logic. So it's impossible to analyze this country from abroad, or sitting comfortable in your chair from New York, Rome, or Brussels. I mean, you have to come here, beside the theoretical understanding that you can learn, but then I think you have to step in the country, understand and breathing the environment and the atmosphere, not just in Istanbul, but going deep in the Anatolia, in the Southeast. That's why I think the West and all these analysts, they have to take a lesson. I mean, first of all, and then they have to learn how to deal with Turkey, and also when we speak at decision-making level, they have to learn how to deal with Erdogan, because Erdogan is just the leader of Turkey, but he's a key actor in the region and at international level. For example, when I look at the European Union, and I repeated this several times also during the election night, I do believe that there was a sort of support granted to, not openly granted, but behind the scene to Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, but also there was a sort of concern. But the main question was, if Kılıçdaroğlu wins the election, he will be able to keep the stability in the region. He would really be able to make a democratic and rule of law understanding of politics and to revitalize the European Union agenda. So this was the main concern. And I do believe also that the West and European Union in particular has been always very hypocritical towards Turkey. And it was comfortable. I mean, do not take me wrong, but I think to some extent it was comfortable for them to have Erdogan, who has created a sort of crack and sort of antipathy towards in Brussels and in some European circles, because it was a good excuse to not proceed further in a genuine dialogue with Turkey and giving to the country what, I mean, it was on the table, starting from the accession process to some dysfunctionalities related to the so-called refugee bill, and also treating Turkey nowadays as a third country rather than a full candidate member towards the European Union. So I think that you have to take this lesson, taking also into account the key role that Turkey, thanks to Erdogan, is playing in the current war between Russia and Ukraine. Because at the end, it was thanks to Turkey if the grain corridor was made and it was extended once more last night. So I think that you have to start a genuine thinking on what they want really from Turkey. Also, when in the European Union will be able, if we will be able to develop a defense system or a defense union. So what kind of role do we have to acknowledge to Turkey? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Valeria. So the changing of the lens through which Turkey is being perceived and analyzed, and also the other one is making up one's mind, especially in decision making and also analysis circles. It played a role in this conflictual, let's say, engagements with Turkey. There is another question now about the impact of earthquake. Yes, the earthquake has been a very huge disaster, and everyone expected it to have a momentous impact on the outcome of the elections. So one question is about how would the earthquake impact the election result in your opinion, and again, how will it possibly impact the result of the runoff round? Professor Acer, would you like to, or Professor Ataman?
Yücel hocam, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, let me first say a couple of points, Bilgehan. Before the election, there was a command from the OSCE the organization saying that government should prepare everything to, you know, a major turnout of the earthquake victims to the pole. And I think this was done like a you know, criticism, assuming that the earthquake victims would vote to the opposition rather than to government. You know, it was the implication that, you know, since the earthquake victims would vote to the opposition, the government was trying to restrict their participation. That was the perception from the organization. It was quite interesting, you know, very, again, quite biased approach, as Valeria described, you know, or just knowing anything about Turkish people or in Turkey. So, but it turned out to be quite different. The people in the earthquake cities hit by earthquakes, they mostly, you know, voted to the government, to the President Erdogan, actually suggesting that it seems like everybody quite clearly understood that this is a disaster of the century. You know, I think that people really understood this, just, you know, experiencing in the first hand these people, or the people, their number has been around 10 million, and they really experienced everything what happened during and after the earthquake. So they all understood that it has been a very significantly major disaster. But despite the scale of the disaster, the government seems to be, you know, quite successful in handling this and afterward effects of the earthquake. And also government, and especially President Erdogan, seems to be quite trusted person for these people. You know, whatever he said, who would probably
Professor Acer, we can't hear you. Maybe something is wrong with the mic. We might have a connection issue with Professor Acer. So until that is sorted, I would like to, if you don't mind, Professor Acer, we can't hear you. I will switch to Professor Ataman. Thank you very much for your answer.
Well, you know, Professor Acer has mentioned several significant points. You know, my answer to this question would be, you know, this was one of the main differences between the ruling party and Erdogan leadership and the opposition and its leader Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. You know, one of the main slogans that were chanted by the supporters of Erdogan: "Don't look at the words, but look at our deeds." That is whatever we did so far in the country. Really, you know, in almost all social, political, and economic dimensions and issue areas, relative revolutions were achieved. That is, from infrastructure to investments in energy sector, especially in the defense industry, in the struggle against international terrorism, etc., etc. The people of Turkey clearly knows that there are too many unresolved issues, such as the economic crisis or the earthquake disaster happened in the south of Turkey, etc. But the people of Turkey knows one thing, that is, they have voted for themselves. They know that the only political leadership, at least given the current circumstances and alternative, the leadership of Recep Tayyip Erdogan is the only alternative who is able to overcome all these problems. I observed, all of us, the people of Turkey, here we observed that even during the COVID-19 pandemic, the people from the opposition, they used to claim that they underlined this point very clearly and repeatedly, that the only leader who can overcome this pandemic is Recep Tayyip Erdogan. So there is a trust because there is an experience there. The people of Turkey repeatedly tested the leadership of Recep Tayyip Erdogan, both in domestic politics, in technical issues, and also in foreign policy, that is at the international arena. And unfortunately, especially after the elections, after the first round, many pro-opposition people, activists, they made many inhumane explanations against the people who voted for Erdogan in the earthquake region. And I personally expect that this will significantly decrease the percentage of the votes casted in favor of Kılıçdaroğlu, and they will turn to Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Because we all know that you, me, and the people of Turkey, we know that in some towns, you know, Kılıçdaroğlu received almost 90% of the votes, and no one supporter of AK Party or Recep Tayyip Erdogan criticized this. You know, in some places where you know, a significant recovery was achieved, was accomplished by the ruling party. So they never questioned the will of the people, that is the national will. So that's why the supporters of Erdogan have been calling the other side, the opposition, to respect, that is to abandon their traditional elitist perception towards the people of Turkey. So this is one of the main reasons. This elitism is one of the main reasons why they do not trust the opposition, especially the CHP and its leader.
Thank you very much, Professor Ataman. I would like to give a chance to Professor Acer to finish his words if he has sorted his issue with the microphone. Professor Acer, would you like to finish your words? No, still we can't hear you. Just excuse me, and I will go to the next question if you don't mind.
Yours is off as well. Your mic is off, Bilgehan.
Sorry, it's my this time it's me. Sorry about technical issues. The other question is about the nationalism's role. I think Valeria has already commented on this in her intervention. So the question is the nationalism key to success in the runoff? Who wants to pick up on that? Valeria, would you like to take this one?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Well, as I said before, I think in the runoff, nationalism would be the main fault line because it's the general trend that we have seen in these political elections. And also, if you look at the composition of the party, MHP gained support, and AK Party won the majority, and then also E Party, which comes from a nationalist group, got some certain seats. And then again, we have to look at the Sinan support, that 5%, more than 5% actually, how it will be redistributed. It will go towards Kılıçdaroğlu, it will go towards Erdogan. But definitely, I think since 2015, the general trend of Turkey, which is not a new element, because also in the past, national conservative
it appears Valeria is also having connection issues.
Maybe this time you can hear me, Bilgehan.
Yes, we can.
Great.
Yeah. Okay. We will see what happened to me again. But, you know, just to complete my comments on the previous issue, then, you know, in the second round of the presidential election, I think the people from the earthquake-hit cities would vote more dominantly to President Erdogan, simply because there was so disappointment on behalf of opposition that the remarks concerning the earthquake victims from the opposition parties were quite, insulting. So, I think that also added to the negative position of earthquake victims towards the opposition parties. So that's why I can say that the President Erdogan would achieve even more votes from these people.
Thank you very much, Professor Acer. Valeria, because of your connection issue, I had to switch to Professor Acer. Please complete your words.
No, I would like just to point it out something, maybe for people that they are not so used to Turkish politics. That nationalism in Turkey is something peculiar of this country. It's nothing related to the nationalist trend that we have in Europe, that they touch some Islamophobic or xenophobic approach. I mean, nationalism in Turkey, I think it's a part of DNA of this country. I mean, the importance granted to the flag, to unity of nations, or the importance of being Turk. And also, nowadays, it's the importance of protecting the national interest of Turkey, which is not just a national interest at domestic level, but it's the national interest as a reflection of what's happening in the region. Because, Turkey is located in a very interesting and also very I would say scaring geopolitical environment. Scaring because, I mean, Turkey is receiving threats from any side of its border. I always say nobody's jealous of Turkey location because you have different threats. I mean, warfare, migrations, and any sort of difficult neighborhood. So in order to protect the national interest of Turkey, it takes effort. And then, of course, it comes also the international conjuncture, so economic dysfunctionality, inflation rate, which is a trend in increasing in all over the world, and the international migration again, terrorism, human smuggling, and so on and so forth. So combining all of these, here it comes the answer to the poll that Erdogan again is strong at domestic level, but also it has an important stake at regional and international level. Thank you.
With this, thank you very much again for your answer, Valeria. I would like to thank each of our speakers. Unfortunately, we have reached the end of our panel discussion. I have to conclude the panel discussion, but I would like to sincerely thank all of our distinguished speakers for their very valuable insights and assessments. I think we have covered almost anything related to the dynamics around the elections on May the 14th. What determines mainly this outcome? What are the key takeaways from the results and their implications for the runoff on the May the 28th. And also, I would like to thank all of our viewers, wherever they happen to be. And I would like to again say thank you to all of our viewers, and hope to meet all of our audience in future events. And till next time, goodbye.